let's get the formal information out of the way. I need name, rank, and serial number, so age, your birthdays, that sort of thing, so maybe start with
Not
you.
our age.
Yeah, they're gonna have to have a birthday.
You
Required. Yes.
12, 13, 40. Every time you go to the hospital or the clinic, they always, that's always, what's your birth? So I got that down. 12, 13, 40.
That's yours.
Yeah.
And one, okay. 1/15/42.
You and I are more contemporaries. In
That's right. Oh, you
where,
want our names? You want us to say our names? Was that it?
oh, don't necessarily
Oh, okay.
need to do that, but
Okay.
we are interviewing Jean Ann and Gordon Honegger.
Mhm.
Need birthplace. Why don't we do you first, Jean
Okay.
Ann?
Fairbury, Illinois.
You were born in Fairbury.
Yes, I was.
Fairbury. And Gordon?
Same.
Fairbury.
Same hospital. 2 years apart.
Wow. Okay. The part of this is aimed at kind of getting the migration into central Illinois from sort of two groups of people. We know that the first settlers were Anglo-Scots-Irish after the Revolutionary War when the Western territories opened up.
Uh-huh.
And then the second bunch, what appear to be mostly Swiss German coming from
Mhm.
Switzerland and Alsace-Lorraine into the New World. So I guess the next question or questions deal then with sort of how long your family has lived in Morton, maybe where did the first generation in the United States of your family come from?
It was Alsace-Lorraine for me. And I would say, geez, they did not immigrate. I think I don't know. Can you rewind that?
That could be-
Gordon knows more about his than I do my family.
So when did your parents come here?
I do not know.
Aha. So they just got here.
They just got here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and always lived right near Fairbury. Strawn, Illinois, Chatsworth, Illinois, Fairbury, Forest. Always, that's where they always lived.
Okay.
Mhm. But I do not know when that was.
Would they have
Because
been,
I just go back to my grandfather.
so your grandfather was here?
Mhm.
And would they have been apostolic by any chance?
Mhm.
Aha.
Mhm.
Okay.
All
Gordon?
apostolic.
But her grandfather was a Kale from Morris, Minnesota. You probably have other people that have had people like that come down here. So there was a big group that came down here from Morris, Minnesota. Koehl.
Mhm. I should have been thinking about that so that maybe I'll even go back and look at it now. But
Well, it's kind of fun when you
Yeah.
do. Gordon,
Well, my history is more definite and more interesting because,
it is.
I came here, Jeanette and I came here in January 1973. And 3 or 4 years after I was here, I discovered that my grandfather and great-grandfather came straight here from Switzerland in 1866. My grandfather was 7 years old, and my great-grandfather was a minister in the Apostolic Church, and he had red hair, and he was kind of invalid, and they had to prop him up against the pulpit in order to give the sermon.
But you mean that they came to Morton, is what Gordon meant. They came here.
Yeah, came here.
They didn't last long here. They came to Forest several years afterwards and are buried in Forest. But that was a history that I didn't realize I had. So I said, my roots are here in Morton.
And they came from Thun, if I remember right, or Zug.
No.
Zurich, near Zurich.
Wasn't that Thun near Zurich? I
Vault.
thought
I thought it was
Andy told me
Vault.
that.
Vault.
Vault.
Vault, okay. All right.
W-A-L-D.
I went back to look at Bachtold Mountain are all Honeggers, and they ended up on two little towns. One was Vald on one side of the mountain, and then one was the other one on the other side of the mountain.
Well, you know, there's a bunch of them still there. When we took the Economic Development Chamber tour over in 2014, I was working with government officials in Vevey, and there on the city council was a Honegger.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
and all of these people, so nearly as I've ever been able to establish, came from within 50 or 100 miles of Barron.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And the deal with Gordon too is that the church directory, I mean, that's how you found out, really,
mhm.
right? The AC Church had this directory where it showed that his,
But all this is in Ancestry.com, as you might
Okay.
suspect.
yeah, but not, it wasn't back, I mean, we didn't have that in 73 when we came.
Do you know why they left in the 1860s?
I thought it was religious persecution
Yeah.
of some sort, especially you'd think the ACs, you know. I don't know if you know them.
I don't know.
Well, that would be my guess, because there was endless persecution
Mhm.
as a result of the split that stemmed from the Reformation.
Mhm.
And eventually, most of them forced in. Reverend Fraley, as you're sure you know, was forced out of his church, which we visited in 2014 when we were over, and wound up and died in Strasbourg, for crying out loud. Yeah. Okay. Have you got any idea how they picked Morton?
No
Or
idea.
forest, or,
Yeah.
no. Well, it had to be agriculture though, too, wouldn't you think, a little of it? Because my side was, they were farmers,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, yeah, they'd always lived on farms. I grew up on a farm, so, and Gordon did too. So I think that would be it. They,
There was a kind of a trail, from what I've been able to determine,
uh,
from landing spots on the East Coast that came
Mhm.
across the Midwest, and it did appear to be agricultural, seeking farmland and places where they could do business and keep their culture.
right,
So they came across Ohio, Indiana,
Yeah.
to Illinois.
yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
And you arrived in Morton just before I did, when we first met, when I moved here. And if I remember, you arrived driving a Triumph TR3
Yeah,
Roadster.
TRC.
We did.
You were the first, certainly the first bankers, and maybe the first anybody to come to Morton in a sports car. Somewhere there's a photo of that.
Yes, there is. Mhm. Yep. It was actually, Gordon, what, you said January, but we got here in, I think, November of 72.
Yeah.
We moved before. Then we started at the bank in January.
And you had been a bank examiner before that, right?
No, I was assistant professor of ag economics at Carbondale at SIU.
Oh, okay. I thought you had been a bank examiner at one time. Yeah. That was me that played the role of the bank examiner
Yeah,
that time. We terrified that guy, Gordon. What's your earliest memory of Morton?
Well, I had to fight my way in. I actually lived in the motel out north of town, the old pepper mill, for almost 6 months by myself, trying to fight my way into town. I wanted to be in banking, and I gave up my job in the spring. I was unemployed all summer, trying to find a bank, and I think I found one in Morton, but it wasn't really available. There was a proxy fight. I thought I'd won the proxy fight, but I lost it because you could change your mind at the stockholders meeting, and so I went back to work to figure out how to get into the bank, and I had two allies, the two minority guys on the board were right about an issue, and the majority finally capitulated when I got an option from the two radicals that they would leave if the majority would hire me. And they agreed to do that. So I started January 1st, January 3rd, actually, without any bank experience as president of the bank. 7 million. Now we're 3.7 billion.
7 employees.
7 employees. Now we have 570 employees.
Yep.
44 years later.
Yeah.
Or
So,
no, is it 44?
Pretty close.
73 to 75.
did you get, make sure,
45 years
Yeah.
later.
that we got that right, started at 3.7 million
No,
We're
started-
we're at 3.7 billion now.
now.
We were 7 million.
Just
Right, so
millions,
7
7
million,
million.
okay.
Yeah.
What I remember is how gorgeous the town was, the homes, you know, the lawns, the people. I should start with that, how welcoming they were when we came.
Dan Grimm was my board chairman.
Who?
Daniel Grimm.
You know,
Dan-
Grim
Grimm Oil.
Oil, north of town, yeah.
But Bill Roker was my advocate, introduced me to everybody in town. That's Dirk's dad now.
And Clyde Ackerman was an advocate then,
And Ben Cook.
and
was
Ben
really-
Cook.
And he was the
Those were the
dairy
2
man.
renegades.
He had his own dairy here in town, delivered milk.
Yeah.
I have the name, I don't know.
They're, I mean, good guys. The
Okay.
renegade means they're good. I mean, they were
Well, they were
Understood.
stood up for their
they were-
their heart.
You know,
Yeah.
How big was Morton then?
I'm not sure.
I'm not either.
See, when I moved here, it was about 9,000, that was 1977.
Mm,
So it would have been a little smaller
Yeah,
than
7.
than that.
Yeah, probably 7 or 8. Yeah.
The founder of the bank was Ben and Orville Barth. And they worked long and hard to sell stock and couldn't sell any because the other bank in town, which dominated, would put a kibosh on anybody that wanted to buy stock. And so he went to Pekin and got some people.
Wow.
And the only people that he could sell stock to in Morton were discontents and mavericks and people like Bill Bartlemy and Clyde Ackerman, who, for heaven's sake, was a Democrat. And but eventually he got enough stock to start a bank charter in 1960, 12 years before I came. Cliff Hasselbacher was the cashier. And
He was their first employee,
Yeah.
Cliff.
Yeah, I knew Cliff.
And Jim
Yeah.
Green, who came from Pontiac, Illinois, was the first president.
Is it fair to, fair to say that at that time Morton was kind of a closed community?
Yes, it was very tight. There was only one other bank in town, and back in those days, the banks made the agricultural loans and business loans and had all the checking accounts. The savings and loans did 2 things. They made home loans and had savings accounts. So people would come to town, as we did. We get our mortgage from Morton Federal Savings and
Morton
Loan.
Federal, yeah,
Open your checking account at the local bank.
yeah. And the ag part was what got you ingrained, so to speak.
And my apostolic background
Yeah.
helped with the apostolics in town. So.
Well, with your degree, I'm saying, and your background with your dad in ag.
So we're rambling here, but
No, that's
this is
part of the, that's part of the
I'm not
the
sure this is
purpose.
history. This is still,
It's
Yeah.
history. It's-
Well, that's what this is, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Lenore.
This was before Caterpillar built the facility here, right? Because that wasn't done until, I think, 74.
no, the road was in,
You know,
and I thought the facility was built. It wasn't expanded as big. But one of the, trying to think of the Caterpillar vice president, he was on the board.
Dick McLean.
Dick McLean was the director of the bank, and he was the manager of the parts plant.
yeah, I didn't know either.
And the other one, Strunk, wasn't,
Yeah.
was part of it too.
But Oscar Mathis, who was a real rebel, and he's been part of the history of the bank, was the chairman.
In the town, he was mayor.
That's Mathis Kelly,
No.
No.
That's
No,
a
no, no.
cousin.
different Mathis.
That's a cousin. He had the
Cousin.
lumber company in town.
You know, the old lumber over here
Yes.
by the cemetery.
But he was a maverick, you know, he kept putting in subdivisions outside of town, like Ossamy and the one out on Route 150, because he couldn't get the zoning that he wanted inside town.
Mhm.
Why was that, do you suppose?
Well, I think he wanted to do it the shortcut way, probably.
No, I mean, why was it so difficult to get permission and to get buy-in from the
Well, because I think he probably wanted to do it his way. You know, put in modern terms, maybe what you always fought against, you know, dead-end streets, you can't get the fire truck around and all that. I'm just presuming, but he was quite a maverick.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Did you come to Morton for any reason before you moved here? Were you visitors to Morton, or had any experience here?
Well, the reason we came to Morton was that I couldn't find a bank. I looked at, and ones I did find, I didn't like the town, like Lewiston, it was dead. We spent a weekend there, and the only thing that moved was a cat in the lobby of the hotel.
Yeah.
And so I went and applied for a job at a job recruiting outside of Carbondale. And Ben Cook and Clyde Ackerman, who were the two people that didn't like what was going on here, they were on the board, and they thought they would win the proxy fight, so they lined me up to be their president. Then they lost the proxy fight. In January of, actually,
No, that was a little before.
72, that was in
Yeah.
70, maybe March or January of 72. So I had filed a charter to start a bank here anyway. Then I dropped it when I got the job. And they dismissed the previous president and hired me. Jean Ann joined 2 or 3 years later.
What do you think most characterized Morton when you came here?
Well, I really like the fact that every town I've ever known had a wrong side of the tracks, the rich side and the poor side. And here in Morton, you have tracks running right through the middle of town, and you don't know which side is the poor side or the rich side. So the equality of housing, presumably the equality of income, kind of struck me as something in Morton. There's no poor side of Morton. Later I found out probably the poor side was the mobile home court, the second one, which a friend of mine now, who came down from Chicago, kind of cleaned that up. So to this day, I don't think Morton's got a slum area that I know of,
Not really.
No.
which every town has.
Yeah.
Forest has it, Fairbury has it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's wonderful about Morton. It's equality of housing, you might say. Or,
Well, and like I said before, the caring. I think people here, I mean, you hear it all the time, that something about Morton. I mean, it's something about the people, I don't know what exactly it is, but we care.
and other people say it's snooty, but it's
Yeah,
really,
no.
it's really
It's not snooty.
caused that by the strong family reunions.
Yeah.
First thing I did when I came here, I joined, what's the little park out north of town?
Optimist Club?
No, the lake.
Oh, Kennel.
Kennel Lake.
You know, and you
Yeah.
go out there and if people aren't friendly to strangers, it's because by the time they say hello to all their cousins, there's no more time in the week.
Yeah, and the church influence, not just apostolic Christian, but I
Yeah.
mean, you know, we kind of say there's a traffic jam in Morton on Sundays.
Yeah.
That it's, and then I think that's the heritage too, of the goodness of this community.
Yeah.
And again, for banking then, I mean, we have people that are really, you know, they care and they pay their bills, and, you know, it's pretty good for banking to have people that want good loans and take care.
I had similar conversation with Ken,
Mhm.
and I was reminded of Glenn Easter. You remember Glenn Easter, the guy we hired as the consultant when we formed the Economic Development Council?
Mhm.
And shortly before he finished his consultancy and was ready to leave town, I took him to lunch, and he said, you know, he said, I really appreciated the time that I spent here. And he said, I've come to one conclusion. He said, that is, you could run the world from Morton. He had such high regard.
Yeah.
There's so many well-intentioned
Mhm.
and competent people, and I think that's the observation that you're making. And there is something special about Morton that I think most people recognize, whether or not they can define it or not.
Mhm.
What do you remember about some of the prominent businesses when you came here?
Well, Witsig's was the big one.
Mhm.
You know, we'd have a line of credit with Witsig's and say, all in favor, and we'd all just open up our suit coat instead of saying yes. And they always had a strong presence at the Pumpkin Festival.
Yes.
They had that key to the treasure where you, so that was kind of a tradition.
Mhm.
And of course, the Dairy Queen downtown was a traditional thing.
Was Grimm there, appliances?
Mhm.
Grill
Sure.
appliances
Sure.
was big.
TV and appliances.
TV and appliances.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Mhm. Ben Franklin on the corner. And on across from that, the drugstore, who, can't think of the name of the
Not
drugstore.
Conover's.
Yeah, Honeggers, yeah. I have some of their, of course, you know, we love antiques and we love this kind of heritage. And I have stuff from both of those places.
I
And
didn't
the,
realize.
the older person that ran the Five and Dime, that was a classic.
Uh-huh.
That wooden floors would creak when you walked
Yeah.
through there.
Yeah, it just had that smell.
But
Yes.
the Pepper Mill was a classy restaurant. That was the
Pepper
classic.
mill's good.
And the world's best sandwich, you know, that,
Had little sauerkraut dishes when you came in for dinner that everybody loved. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. German,
Yeah.
Swiss.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Was Miller Bakery there?
Sure. Right across from Witsig's.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yummy. Good stuff. Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest change you have observed in Morton over the past 45 years?
More subdivisions. I mean, we've grown. It's
Yeah.
bigger. But again, businesses are coming. You know, we're having, and downtown is, well, when we came, downtown was thriving, and then it kind of went down a little bit, and now we're back. I think it's a good thing. I think this history project's going to help that too, with the walking and pointing out a lot of the highlights. It's
When I came in 77,
Mhm.
you made me the loan for my first house.
Gordon did.
Yeah.
Didn't have you sign. I mean, you know, back then.
I think I just drove by the bank and he handed me an envelope. I can't remember.
Back then it was all on your.
Morton in those days, the business district, as I recall, basically extended from Jackson and Main Street was kind of the one intersection, Jefferson in the middle, and then it
Right.
kind of tapered off
That's right.
down around Chicago Street, and there really wasn't anything else till you got out to Pioneer, and then
Right.
the mall, which is at one time had a stronger presence than it does now.
Yeah, it did.
And then it extended, what I would call the core of downtown ran from maybe about 3rd Street or Illinois at the furthest east to Detroit. Is that about what it looked like?
But then in '78 is when we built our first branch, you know, out on South Main.
Remember
South
that,
Main.
yeah.
Yeah. And again, looking to the Swiss German heritage, started that architecture, our signature now, the
Yes.
clock tower.
Yes,
And that was the first one, and Gordon can tell how that came about with Jerry Welton, an architect, and he drew that clock tower and that bank on a napkin. Then Zobrist built it.
I think they changed it. There were certain families that were prominent,
Yeah.
you know, and I think those have diluted or, you know, so the whole town's become more professionalized and more formal and just like banking has become more formal, like, you know, the national, everything's become more, as you get bigger, you just have to do more paperwork and do more things formally and.
Well, the sign of the times. I mean, we used to be a handshake, and now it's still a handshake, but it's a couple other things. Yeah, a little more complicated. It's got to be.
One thing that was different, you know, we built that branch thinking Morton was gonna grow south, but turned out Morton grew north.
The interstate, some of that.
Well, it jumped over I thought the interstate would be a barrier, but it wasn't, you know. I mean, look how much more there is north now than south.
Well, if you remember, there was a study done in '79, I can't remember who was mayor, but the consultants predicted the growth to go south, and there was this kind of this notion for a number of years that, well, everybody's gonna go there, and that housing was gonna develop that way. But as you say, it didn't. Everybody wanted to go north where the trees were.
Yeah.
And it did jump the freeway. Helped, I suppose, by Hyde Park, because that was sort of the popular residential side at the time.
Yeah. Well, and Hyde Park was built by the people you were talking about, right?
Solier.
The Solid.
Yeah, Ackerman, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because I lived in Waldheim for a period, and that was Warner, and I can't remember who else was involved, Zobrist, I think,
Yeah.
in that.
you're right.
I think so.
And then Prairie Village was developed, which was one of the first ideas around here for a condominium, and that turned out to be more popular, I think, than a lot of people would have imagined at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is there anything else you can think of that ought to be an observation as you look back, or anything that you think of from your own family histories that would kind of bear on the historical development of Morton?
I still think we're newcomers, you know, we've only been here 44 years.
That's what I tell people.
Yeah, no, we're not native in any way.
What do
Can't
you
compare.
What do you suppose, and this has been kind of a question for me, maybe to some extent a rhetorical question, what do you suppose caused, with all the travel across the center of the United States when the Western territories opened up, and all these people were originally Anglo-Scots-Irish, I mean, the old historical names are Campbell, you know, one of the original settlers of Morton. And somewhere in the mid-1800s, mid to late 1800s, the cultural groups became predominantly these Swiss German groups that came through, you know, the Amish, the Mennonites, the Apostolics, and some other offshoots from that. I don't know whether it was because they found the agricultural environment so agreeable, or whether it's sort of clusters of people where they felt comfortable culturally. But at some point, there was a transition here from the early settlers to these people that I think pretty much gave Morton its current identity, and responsible for a lot of its strengths because of their commitment to family and their ideas about how you live your life, and honesty and forthrightness and that sort of thing. How do you suppose that took place?
I think you just answered it. I think that's what it is. And
Just
well,
sheer-
the ag, the religion,
Sheer volume of numbers. One came and then more came.
yes, yeah, that's how it was in Forest.
No?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
You think so too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we need to cover, you think, that would relate to the Honegger family history here, the bank, and things that you think are important?
Well, as you know, we really support the town. I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
Lenore talked about the
Town crier.
town crier,
Yeah.
that we did, and then of course the park down here, we're all behind that. We've got 3 banks in town that we that we started. And then the softball field for girls, and then out south we have the boys baseball. So we're always looking for a new project, something to add to the goodness of Morton and our other towns. I mean, with our bank, we have 40 branches, so I mean, and it's all in this this area. So
Well, I think your names are clearly associated with that. That would be lost on no one, I think, that you talk about the bank, you talk about the Honegger family, you're talking about commitment to the community and support for the community.
Did you talk to Rudy? He did a little mini. I remember one day he had 5 guys come to the bank and sat in front, and he tape recorded a whole bunch of stuff from.
you're right.
Like the Bounds and people like that.
You know Rudy, right? Rudy Husick.
I know who he is. I may have met him once or twice,
If you
but
haven't,
Does he still live here? I
Oh,
think
yeah.
he still lives here.
But if you haven't contacted him, or if he hasn't contacted you, I mean, he's got some great recordings from some people have already died who were giving those
I
recordings.
didn't realize we had that.
Like Wayne Baum's older brother. And they were telling some great old stories.
Wasn't this at the
It was a Saturday or?
yeah, it was at our fireplace at the bank, right?
Yeah.
They all sat around the fireplace in big chairs.
Is it Husick?
It's EU. I think
EU.
it's HEUS. He was a Rotarian with me forever. Didn't his wife just pass? I don't
I
know.
don't know if I
Yeah, and he married somebody else.
know. Well, that was quite a while.
Yeah,
I've heard about him for years, but I've never
Yeah.
really,
Well, he was Getz's right-hand man over at the Morton Buildings.
who's right in
Hank.
Getz.
there? Oh, okay. Yeah. Henry.
In fact, I think Getz was at the fireplace talking. I mean, I think he was telling
Hank.
Hank,
Mhm.
Henry Getz.
Yeah.
That's right. He had some kind of a plan at one time, I think, to have some sister city relationship with Germany or bring some Germans over or
Yeah, yeah.
something.
No, he's very, very aggressive and creative. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
but if you on this history thing, I'm just sure.
I had not thought about that, but that's a really good
But
suggestion.
that was how many years ago? Was it?
No, this was 6 months ago or 9 months ago, maybe a year ago. But
Huh,
it
I had
was-
no idea
I
about
think
that
it
at
was
all.
longer than
It wasn't a
that.
long deal. I mean, it was an hour. But they told some really good stories.
Well, maybe we should find it for you.
Well, if you can do
Yeah.
it, that's fine. Was Bud Zobrist there?
Gordon was there.
I think Bud was there.
Yeah, I didn't go see it.
Bud
I knew it
is
was
just a
coming.
fountain of these kinds of,
Mhm.
I mean, he's
Yeah.
somewhere in this stretch of buildings down here in South Main across from the Dairy Queen, between the walls or in the basement or something, there's a tree growing, or was a tree, they built right around it. Bud used to talk about that, and when Bartlemy was the constable,
Uh-huh.
they used to go on patrol, and apparently, if I remember right, a card game or something that went on, and they would all be quiet when he went by so he could pretend he didn't know. And at least that's what I think about it.
Yeah, if you want some real old folklore, there were a few good ones they told that afternoon, or I think it was a Saturday afternoon.
I think if you can find that, or I will pursue it if you want, if we lay hands on that, that would be great. That could go in
Mhm.
with the other material.
Mhm.
Somebody will have to edit
Yeah,
all this.
well, and listen to it first, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
What did you guys, can I ask, what did you do with the kids on the weekend? Or what was kind of the family outing when you were raising your family back in the day?
Yeah.
Family outings when our kids were little. What did we do around here? Okay. Played games,
Well, Kennel Lake, we went out
Kennel
there
Lake.
once in a while.
yeah. We had a racquetball court at home.
Platform tennis.
Platform
actually.
tennis. What else? Oh, we went, let's see. Clark's lived across the street.
Went to Wildlife Prairie quite a bit.
Wildlife Prairie, yeah.
We never canoed down the Mackinac, which I always.
No.
That- I'm still gonna do that.
Canoe down the Mackinac?
Yeah.
It was different life then, Lenora.
Was it?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like nowadays you have to have something going on every weekend. You have to do something with your kids all the time. You have to always enhance and implement. Uh-huh. It was more stay at home and I don't know.
Well, the kids did their own, I mean, my kids went to school about the same time
Well,
here.
yeah.
And then mostly they did things, I mean, they
They
played,
played outside.
yes,
Yeah,
went with
Andy had
friends
the
or-
big wheel and they built ramps on the, well, we didn't have any street when we moved there. We had to go to the post office to get our mail. But anyway, yeah, the kids played outside and the great neighborhood. I mean, it's the town. And
well, kids could go anywhere because it was safe. You didn't
It
really
was.
worry much about
it
what your
was.
kids did.
Yeah,
As
so
long
we
as you
didn't
had,
have to be planning to drive to Peoria to do something or, it was always just real casual. Picnics, yeah, the great park system here. Oh, yeah, we go out to, the parks. And we go to the school grounds to go on the
you know,
playground stuff. Pretty simple.
Were there businesses downtown that you missed that aren't there
Oh,
anymore?
I miss Witzig's.
You miss Witzig's?
Oh, yeah. So that's where we shopped all the time. I never went out of town. Didn't have catalogs back. I mean, we didn't have, sales and all that and catalog stuff. No, we bought everything here.
people came from miles around to shop at Witsig's.
Yeah.
And-
We had great grocery stores
Yeah,
here.
and to eat at
Oh,
Peppermill.
yeah.
So they were both draws. People came to Morton for those things.
Yeah. Well, in South Main too,
Yeah.
out at the Field Shopping Center. Huge, wonderful grocery store.
Yeah,
And all the store, I mean, what all was out there? Yeah, I went out there all the time.
Country Market is
Country Market, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty easy and laid back, simple.
Yeah.
okay.
So are you doing most of the interviews or some?
No, I don't think so. I volunteer. I mean, I'm sort of doing what they asked me to do, but the idea is a number of people will do them, and we're gearing up the high school journalism class to do some of them, because I think it's really important that they get out and visit some of these folks, and they're not enough of us,
Yeah.
that we really need kind of a force to get out there. And my fear is that some of those people will be lost. I understand Ken Getz is already having some difficulties with his memories and not in very good health, and so
Oh, really?
lose Ken's perspective. I make sure we get to Bud and some of the other people
Yeah.
that are
Uh-huh.
the old timers, folks that I would love to, where's Harold when we need him, Harold Witzig,
Yeah.
and had great stories. He was trained as a watchmaker,
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so I've always had this fear that this would be
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I'm going to help coach the high school kids, and I think that they will acquit themselves pretty well. They got a sheet of questions. So once people start talking and sort of remember the old days, a
Yeah.
lot of these folks will volunteer the information that
Yeah.
will just come out.
Yeah.
But I think it's important,
Yeah. Oh, yes.
and ties back into that idea. I think that Morton is unique. You've heard me say this before, but I traveled all over the world, and there just aren't very many Mortons, and there's a reason for that. I don't know that you can always put your finger on it, but it's a characteristic of Morton.
It is. It is. And you asked if we came down here, if we had any, allegiance to it before. Well, through the church, I mean, as kids, we went to church, but we aren't members now.
Yeah,
You know how that is with and so we would see kids here, I think, and like you say, with Bill Roker and the Rokers, we have, you just have a lot of people that were Forestites, and then they know all the Morton people, and so we knew about Morton.
I imagine there was a fairly strong relationship between the various congregations around
Absolutely,
the community.
the kids especially.
Well, they travel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The church didn't have a formal, like basketball team, but the
Right.
kids ended up, it's
Yeah.
kind of like the Amish over in, we have a bank now over in Arthur. And
Uh-huh.
it's interesting how the Amish don't go to the public schools, but they use the public schools baseball diamonds as late as midnight. They got their own
All teams.
ball teams, and it's crazy to see all those buggies lined up in front of them at 10 o'clock at night playing softball. Anyway, this is great.
Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, yeah.
We appreciate it.
We want to see it. That's going to be the work.
Well, I'll tell you one person who's gonna be key to all that, and that's Mary Lynn. So this is gonna have, there's gonna be some work here, 'cause it's been